Hello. How are we all doing? Welcome to episode 71 of the Sean McGinn's podcast. What's happening? October 11th here as I record this in Sydney, and it is the day everyone's kind of back out. Freedom Day. Every time I hear of Freedom Day, I kind of just picture Braveheart, William Wallace. Not quite as dramatic as that today as I went down the bus, but yes, good to be back to somewhat normality. Although I must say it hasn't affected me too much. Touch wood, as I said, but I know it's affected a lot of the people that I work with, clientele that I train face to face. It's funny, we're going to get into today's topic, but this is just on my head at the moment, so I might as well spit it out. I was talking today with George and Andrew, two of my colleagues, and he was discussing one of his clients who didn't leave the house. I think left the house twice in 4 months, which is like literally didn't leave the house apart from twice in 4 months. Got the groceries delivered. It's actually hard to wrap your head around. But anyway, the person said, and obviously there's going to be circumstances like that is going to be alarm bells in terms of mental health, depression. It's like some signs, but let's just say this person is quote unquote mentally stable. There's nothing going on there outside of it. I think the person said, "Oh look, I just like being an indoors person," and we're having an interesting discussion because we're saying, right, yes, people may be introverted and like the house better or whatever, but we also have to take into account from a fundamental level, like we've evolved in tribes, we've evolved to be social creatures. So it's funny when people say this. It's probably kind of like when people say, "Oh, I only need 5 hours of sleep." Why do you have to set a fucking alarm clock every night? Like if you actually let your body sleep in, you'll probably sleep till 7-8 hours. When people say I just like being by myself, we've evolved to have certain needs in regards social, in regards getting outside, in regards all this kind of stuff. So you can't like go against your biology. Your personality is a higher level process. Deeper down is that like limbic reptilian brain. You can't override your personality can't override the way we've evolved. So, and obviously I understand that as you get into your comforts, that just you may just not realize you're in as much of a hole as you are. So yeah, I don't know why I just said that, but it ties back into the Freedom Day kind of thing. So what I'm trying to say is it's good we're out of it, and hopefully all these people that got stuck in a rut like that can get back to functioning more normally and socializing. And even though they may think it's not for them, it is at fundamental level because we've evolved that way. And it's some crazy statistics like people go sitting is the new smoking. Well, loneliness is the new smoking, and the fact that the crazy chemical reactions that go on when you're on your own and you're not in a social group, in regards high cortisol, and there's some crazy physiology that happens negatively when you're on your own, even though you may not realize it. So yes, hopefully for all those people that are in that same boat can get back and chatting, and it's maybe the time now. If you are in a lockdown, say hello to someone. If you see them on their own, say hello, how are you going? Give a little smile. And I think that's one of the good things from this is people are a bit more friendly. People are a bit more wacko as well, so it's gone both ways. But yeah, you take the good with the bad. Anyway, in today's episode, I've had lots of questions and lots of queries to discuss this topic, so thought today would be the day to do it on today's podcast. Saves me replying to everyone individually. I can just kind of point them to this podcast when they ask about that in the future. And if you do, that's not me saying don't ask me questions. It's saying I'll hopefully get topics together so you can go and listen to that. And this is one today. And we're going to talk about intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting. We're going to talk about its uses, why it's good, its potential cons, because any kind of diet strategy you may look at that has gained popularity, I myself and a lot of fitness people may be the first people to say, well, that's fucking shy. But as maybe painful as some of them are, you have to go, okay, why did that work? How can we utilize that potential thing in our own strategy? The same way you could look at the Atkins diet. You go, well, Atkins diet's stupid. Well, it worked because it was such high protein diet, and we know high protein diets work. So let's take that bit of that diet strategy out and then put it into our overall a bit more sustainable. In the same way with this, there's a lot of potential strategies we can use, and it's just another tool. So we're going to talk about how to or when to apply this tool, if it's for you, if it's not, and why it isn't, why it's not. So intermittent fasting was traditionally is the 16-8. So it's basically when you're not eating for 16 hours and then you have an 8-hour eating window. And the 16-hour fasting or period where you're not eating is generally like, say, 12 hours at night time, and it could be like the 2 hours either side of that. So for example, you may eat dinner around 6 p.m. and then nothing else till about 6 to 10 a.m. then at 10 a.m. next morning. It was popularized by a guy, I forgot to write in my notes, but he's a Swedish personal trainer, Mark something. Excuse me for missing out, but you can go and research that. And then further onto that was more in terms of weight loss. I think he researched it. But then there's been more research around time restricted eating, which is basically just like restricting the time you're eating. Same as intermittent fasting. And done in terms of lots of health benefits. Okay, and we're going to differentiate those health benefits from simply when you lose fat, you might gain the same. One prominent person in that industry is Dr. Sachin Pandan. So he's a great researcher looking at the potential benefits in terms of health, longevity, circadian rhythms. So go check out him. He's brilliant. But we'll talk about some of his ideas as well. So let's get into some of the positives of intermittent fasting. Because you're giving somebody, most people may eat, say traditionally they could get up in the morning, they may graze, they could be awake for 14 to 16 hours. Okay, so they may be eating at random times within that period. Well, suddenly, if we reduce that to 8 hours, you're reducing a large chunk of calories in that person's day. So what's going to happen? It's probably going to be easier for that person to stay in a deficit or get them into a calorie deficit. Thus, it can potentially help a lot of people lose weight. It's not a magic thing. It's nothing to do with the fasting that you're burning more fat when you're fasting. It's simply just calorie reduction. That's all it is. There may be some people that don't like tracking their calories, don't want to put too much conscious effort into thinking about what they're going to eat. So they may go, okay, well, I'm just going to eat within a smaller window, and that in itself is reducing that person's overall calories per day. So in that regard, it can be very good. Obviously, if we look at, say, a 16 hour period where someone's awake, there may be periods where you eat and you eat a little bit, you don't really feel satisfied, and you eat again, and you're just grazing so much. It's just so easy to overconsume on calories. So it's a tool where people don't have to put as much conscious thought into restricting their calories to get them in a calorie deficit. They just say, I'm going to not eat until this time. And it's funny when it comes to fat loss. I've talked about flexible dieting before, and there's kind of a Goldilocks point where if something's too restrictive, rigid, so for example, when people go, I'm going to cut out this, or I'm going to not eat this, that can be counterproductive, because you'll end up just binging out on that. And rigid diet has been seen to not get good results compared to a more flexible approach. But what I see people like, a flexible approach is where you kind of fit in some good food into your overall calories, but that can go the opposite way again, because too much variety can also be counterproductive to your goal. So there's kind of a sweet spot between some kind of structure and rules, not being too rigid where it's going to stop you, or it's going to cause a lot of kind of mental issues in regards being very black and white, a perfectionist, and feed into that. So this approach for some people can hit that Goldilocks nicely, where they can still fit some flexible foods into that period, but there's a rules, there's a structure around it where they're eating within a certain time. And so you could potentially get the benefits of both worlds. Now, before you start jumping and starting restricting your calories, wait until I go through pros and cons of both. Okay. Where this can be potential benefit, so this is point number 2 of the positives, is for people with a smaller calorie deficit. So say I get a female that wants to lose weight, they could be 50 or 60 kilos, or lose body fat. Off the top of my head, let me just have my phone here while I'm in front of me. Their calorie deficit is 50 kilo would be 1,300 calories if they're kind of active. Okay, so that person, if they're having 3 meals per day, each meal could contain 400 calories roughly. Okay, that's not going to be a lot. So they may eat their breakfast and then they still may feel a little bit hungry, and then they may eat the lunch, still feel a bit hungry, and they eat the dinner and still feel a bit hungry. So they feel more like they're on a diet. Now, that person could, and this doesn't really tie into intermittent fasting, it can and doesn't at the same time, because we could just talk about the amount of meals someone eats, but let's just use this for example. So that person could then just restrict their calories into this 8-hour period, eat 2 meals per day, and that they could have 650 calories. Bigger meals, so they don't feel like they're dieting. They feel full after the meals, they feel satisfied, satiated, and they 2 of those, and then come the evening, they're like, well, I've had 2 big meals, I actually feel good. And sometimes not eating, and if you just say, right, I'm just going to fast until whatever lunchtime, sometimes it's actually easier fasting than eating a little bit, because when you eat a little bit, you're hungrier after. It kind of sets everything going again. But if you just don't eat, that could be a bit easier to manage. So you drink a few coffees, black coffees, the kind of first half stress of your day gets you to lunchtime, and you can have 2 bigger meals. Obviously, this isn't true. Say, for example, someone's 100 kilos overweight. Their calorie deficit is going to be 2,700 calories if they're kind of somewhat active. So if they eat 2 meals, 1,300 calories a meal, you're having a feast, but it's not as important. It's more important for the person on the smaller calorie deficit to make them feel kind of like they're not on a diet. And dealing with that hunger in the first half of the day is easier, and then thus they can reap the rewards of 2 bigger meals. A case where this tool could be applied, and where I've used it with people. But the way I think of it, I don't think more of it is the intermittent fasting. I just think, okay, just eat 2 meals a day. So another positive, so point number 3 of fasting, time restricted eating, all this kind of stuff, is you're giving your digestion a rest. I think the problem in today's world is when we're constantly eating throughout the whole day, your digestion's working, all the hormones that needs to be secreted when you eat are working, your body's constantly on. It needs periods of being off, of not having to digest everything, to kind of clear everything out. detox yourself in a sense. For people, this could be potentially positive for those with digestive issues, where you're giving your digestion periods off of everything to kind of heal back up. Because I think when you're constantly eating, you are causing stress to a lot of the systems involved in that, like the lining, I'm not going to say anymore because I can't remember the mechanism off the top of my head, but that in itself, just going to help everything clear itself out. So you need periods of not having any food in for that to work. And this is especially true at nighttime. This is one of the things that I think is very good from this, which we'll talk about at the end when I give you my thoughts on how it could be used, is having periods before bed where you're, say for example, you eat at 6. Okay, it's going to take 2-3 hours to digest that meal, which probably bring you up to about 9, and then you might go to sleep at 10 or 11, whatever your schedule is. Okay, so just eating 2 hours before bed's probably still too close, because your body could be digesting meals for 4 or 5 hours. What am I saying? It could be way longer. So we need periods before bed where we've kind of emptied everything out. So that's going to help. It can potentially help melatonin release, can help your body produce all these hormones and chemicals to get you into good sleep. But also, if you're eating very close to bed, when we sleep, your body and brain goes through massive amounts of repair in regards like flushing the fluid from your brain. So this crazy stuff is going around, killing cancerous cells, killing all these kind of bad cells that replicate. Every type of repair you can think of. However, when people eat very close to bedtime, they may think they're sleeping, but it's not going to be regenerative sleep, because the body has to break that food down, where they would rather put in their resources to use to quote unquote fix your body and brain at other places. So the positive in this regard is giving your digestion a rest at nighttime especially. So you may time your last meal, or if you're going to take something from this strategy, time it maybe like 3 or 4 hours before if you can. So you're going to bed nice and fasted, to give your digestion a rest and to let your body and brain repair. Number 4, we can talk about circadian rhythm, which relates to what I said. I mentioned melatonin and not eating too close to bed, because when we eat too close to bed, not only does it then disrupt your sleep in regards your body's breaking all that food down and doing everything with it when it wants to be doing something else, but it can potentially disrupt. So when you eat, it's going to release some insulin most of the time, unless you're ketogenic. But even then, this mechanism may still work. And when you can produce insulin, it could potentially disrupt the melatonin pathway. So basically, when you fire up like your pancreas, your liver, all that kind of stuff, when you eat food in general, it kind of fires up the factory. So for example, think of like you've plugged out for the day, you've switched the light off in the factory, you're going home. That's like your body's time to repair. However, you come back in, you turn the lights on, you fire all the machinery back up, the factory's back on again. So if you put food into the factory at night, it's going to fire it up. So it can think it's the daytime in a sense. So there's lots of different factors that feed into regulating a circadian rhythm, or basically telling our body and brain what time it is. Light's obviously one of the biggest ones, but other things, food as well. We see this during like jet lag, where people try to mimic fasting to get onto a new time zone, because that's one of the biggest things that keeps people jet lagged. Excuse me. Is when they're eating, so the body thinks it's still daytime. Keep eating. Evolutionary times, you eat during the day, you stop at night. Eat when it's light out, or then you stop when it's dark. So, and then you probably say, well, what's the reason for circadian rhythm? And your circadian rhythm basically will tie into energy production. It will tie into making you feel awake in the morning, helping you sleep at night, your metabolism, potentially like burning more calories in a sense. All these essential health benefits that we need to get a proper circadian rhythm. Anyone that been jet lagged knows that's when your circadian rhythm is completely off. So we're trying to get a circadian rhythm 100% on track to further enhance our fat loss by way of having more energy, having better appetite regulation. If your circadian rhythm's off, you're going to crave like higher sugar, higher calorie foods. You're going to have less energy. You're not going to want to train. You won't be awake in the morning. You're going to need more caffeine, etc., etc. So we want the whole system working together. So we want to time our food that's not too late to keep our circadian rhythm in check. So some few meals before we go to bed too close to bed can disrupt your circadian rhythm, which then falls into the next day and the next day and the next day. So yes, and that's what a lot of the research Dr. Satchipanda looks at, circadian rhythm, and how timing your food not too close to bed and potentially then a few hours after waking up is ideal for your circadian rhythm. And the fifth main positive that I can think of I have here, and there's obviously a few more, but these are the main ones you probably need to know, is it can potentially work with your lifestyle. As we said, we looked at those with a smaller calorie deficit, potentially work with a lifestyle. But the other reason, or the other kind of clientele I think of when I say this, is the person who's very busy in the morning. So they may not want to think about food. They may just be happy with their coffee. They might be getting their kids ready to take them to school, and they have to think about their own stuff, and they're rushing around, and then they're late for work and they're catching the train. So, and then the first half of the day, because they're probably on the go, their cortisol's up a little bit. They're thinking about what to do. They're in meetings. They don't have time to think about food, so they probably just rather not eat and then save those calories for the middle of the day, or for that 8-hour period, or whatever works best. And when we're looking at nutrition plans, we always want it perfectly to match our lifestyle, because that's going to match the sustainability of the plan. So if none of those positives it doesn't work with your lifestyle, and you have a bigger calorie deficit, may not be for you, because that's going to work against it. So you don't have to try fit around a round peg into a square hole. Okay, we want them to fit nicely. And obviously for every positive there's some cons, some pros or some cons, and these are some of them I have here. So like anything, these things can be taken to the extreme. When we look at fasting and then eating, what could potentially happen is a kind of restrictive and then binge pattern. So people may think, oh, when the 8 hours I eat, I'm going to absolute gorge on binge on lots of food. And this in itself can potentially further a bad eating pattern. And it's probably a bit worse now these days. Like if we think of caveman times, well, you're hardly going to binge. Or you're going to binge on berries and veggies. It's a bit different now in times that food, high processed, palatable food is everywhere. So we have to be careful about how we use this strategy, because one of the biggest things people struggle with is the food environment and saying no, and that's normal because our brains have been wired to preference these foods over other foods. So people can fall into kind of this disordered eating patterns. So if you maybe have struggled with disordered eating in the past, probably not for you. If you find you're very OCD with things, and then we're looking at things from a psychological point of view, this may be not for you. So that's one of the potential cons. And this is more for fasting in the morning. So if we do a 16-hour fast, we're going to end up fasting for a few hours in the morning to the mid half of the day. When we do this, naturally, it's going to upregulate some stress hormones, because the stress hormones working the mechanisms of kind of releasing blood sugar, and then kind of using that for energy. However, for some people that are very stressed, we may be adding more fuel to that fire. So if that person has already maybe underslept, overworked, overtrained, underfueled, and then we're making them fast, well, we're actually just making them more stressed, and we're pushing them further towards the point of the allostatic load, pushing them further off past the point where they're going to plummet. And in terms of fat loss, that in itself is going to be so counterproductive, because they're going to end up stress eating, they're going to be burnt out, getting sick, not training. We're just going to burn them out completely. One of the things that can decrease high cortisol is food, but especially like carbohydrates, good carbohydrates especially. So yes, it's multifactorial. We could have two exact same people with different environments, different conditions, and have two different strategies completely suited to that. One person may be using intermittent fasting finally, they may be relaxed, they may sleep perfect, they may not have a lot of financial career stress, they may be single. You get my point. And that person may go actually great on intermittent fasting or fasting for a few hours in the morning anyway, because that little bit of cortisol producing is going to be fine. The body's going to be able to deal with that, obviously. But then we have the other person who has everything going on, and then this may push them further over the edge. So we may need to get that person some fuel in the morning to make sure they don't burn out, and then mitigate that the high stress cortisol from that skipping meals may bring. Going off that point, for point number 3, I have someone's physiology may not be able to deal with it. And this is in terms of what I said in regards stress, and we have to look at the environment and conditions we are currently in. So it may not be suited to you, maybe suit you when you're a bit more chilled out or whatever. But also in terms of if I have someone who's unhealthy, they want to lose weight, and we know just losing weight are going to reverse a lot of those conditions anyway. But if someone, say, is obese, they may be pre-diabetic, well, the body's not as good as breaking down fuel and using that for energy. So skipping meals may mess with their blood sugar too much, whether then they may just drop weight too below baseline, hypoglycemic, and then their energy goes all over the place, and they may get headaches, etc., etc. So that may be not suited to them. For people low blood pressure, may not be suited to you. And yes, so this is the same thing where one strategy for two different people, one with a good health status and one with a not a good health status, and may be suited more to the person with a good health status rather than the person that physiology is a bit all over the place. So it could be the person that's pre-diabetic needs more regular meals, maybe obese needs more regular meals, keep that blood sugar stable. And this will tie in as well where I have with one of the other points for women. There's some speculation that women may not be as good with intermittent fasting or skipping meals than men. From a hormonal point of view, some people there may say they're a bit more susceptible to stress hormones, and that may affect them a bit worse in terms of like fertility, in terms of all these other menstrual cycle, which relates into that. From a psychological point of view, where they're already fed with a lot of restriction and binge type patterns early in life, and also from a point around the menstrual cycle where fasting in the 2 weeks before, especially where their blood sugar goes off and all the good chemicals in the brain, serotonin, drop, and we may need more regular meals and actually higher carbohydrates more regularly around that to keep everything stable and stop them from binging out. Well, periods of fasting may just further enhance disordered eating patterns and further enhance them binging out. So it's not working with the physiology, it's actually working against it. So that is another point. We have potential muscle loss because we are fasting for periods, especially with fat loss, where what we're trying to do is protect muscle tissue. And to do this, we need to get, say for the 12 hours we're awake or 12 hours we're going to eat, we ideally need a big portion of protein, and that's going to stop protein, or it's going to, what's called muscle protein synthesis. It's going to make sure we're giving our body enough so it doesn't rob, it repairs our muscles from training, but also doesn't rob the amino acids from our muscles to use. So obviously if you have 3 big meals per day, if that lasts 4 hours, that's around 12 hours per day. So that is the most optimal strategy to maintain muscle, is to give ourselves kind of 3 or 4 protein periods a day, feeding periods a day, spaced out over, say, that like 10 or 12 hour period, where if we're fasting, we are actually more susceptible to muscle loss. Now, caveats within this, obviously if someone has a lot of weight to lose, when we look at muscle loss, it's more of a thing where you look at how much muscle you have, then you look at kind of how much fat you have, just visually. If you're very obese, you have a bigger fat to muscle ratio. So when you start to lose weight, the majority of that is going to come from the higher percentage ratio, the higher ratio. So you're going to lose more fat. You're not going to lose much muscle. As you start to get leaner and leaner and leaner, and as the ratio becomes more even of fat to muscle, then you're more susceptible of muscle loss. So take this into account maybe, and then say, right, if I'm very lean and I want to maintain my muscle and get leaner, an intermittent fasting approach may not be suitable for optimal results. Whereas if I have, 20, 30 kilos to lose, I'm not too concerned with muscle loss yet. I'm still going to ways we can mitigate muscle loss with intermittent fasting. We still need to make sure we hit a protein target, okay, and we still need to make sure we're weight trained. That in itself may be enough if someone has a lot of weight to lose, to mitigate any muscle loss effects. But as they get leaner and leaner and leaner, it becomes, meal timing in a sense becomes more important, and spacing those protein feedings out. As I said, it may result in binging. I had a client that we tried an intermittent fasting approach, and this is actually a perfect example of 2 different conditions where this strategy works. So at one time, one of my clients was working right across from a delicious pastry cafe. So she'd go alright, she'd fast for a few hours, and then once she's starting to get hungry, once she's starting to break that fast, those like delicious donuts and pastries across the way would be screaming her name. And obviously, when we're in a fasted period, or when we're in a hungrier period, we actually get like more of a high from processed food, because you can just imagine you're going to get a higher dopamine release. Again, going back to evolution times, makes sense that if you're hungry and you get some food, and the more high calorie, the better, you're going to release lots of amount of dopamine as a reward. So they say when someone's in a calorie deficit, they actually get a bigger reward from processed foods, which is again why it's hard to sometimes eat those foods in the right amount when we're in a deficit. So that was her problem, and then she just binge out and ruin her calories in that period. However, that person, again, she's been in lockdown for 4 months, but even before that, she's not surrounded by a large amount of food availability, and uses that same strategy now to success. And again, she doesn't have a big amount of calories, so it actually works well with the things I've said, and she weight trains and hits her protein. So that works nicely for her in the right environment and conditions. As I said, for some, maybe with a big calorie deficit, it may be hard to get enough protein and sufficient calories in that window of 8 hours. When we eat big feedings of food, for some, if you're trying to get a massive amount of calories into that window, it's going to leave you sluggish and a bit tired if you don't space it out properly, like if you're gorging out, because obviously all that blood's just going to go to your stomach then. So that's another thing to think about. And when people do this, obviously it's great when they lose fat, but we want to make sure that they realize why they're losing fat. It's not down to intermittent fasting, it's down to they're in a calorie deficit. And we always have to think, like, is this method sustainable. It may be great to get someone into a deficit and then get them to starting to lose weight. And for some people, then they may even like transition over to 3 meals a day or more regular meal schedule. But we also want to realize that no one loses fat forever, and we may lose fat in periods of time. And then when it gets a bit hard, you may bring your calories back to maintenance. And I think when people don't, at some point, get an education around calories and maintenance calories and what they can do to bring back up, and how this may not be sustainable for certain periods, that could potentially lead them back to where they came from. So if it's a time where you're like, all right, I'm going to use the strategy, I tick off all those boxes Sean talked about, but obviously as you start to lose weight, at some point you're going to get hungry, and at some point you're going to get mentally exhausted. So you go, okay, I'm then just going to come back to maintenance calories for 1 to 2 months. And when you're on higher calories, you can eat more food, and then you may not have to squeeze them all into that 8-hour period. You may be comfortable eating 3 meals a day. And obviously within maintenance calories, you're going to bring your calories, let's say 500 calories up from where they were in a deficit. And you can hang around there and let everything reset before you go again. But if someone gets to that point where they lose a lot of mental weight and that they don't know what to do when times get very tough and they feel very hungry and sluggish and mentally exhausted, they may end up binging out because they don't know how to bridge the gap between the diet and then kind of coming back to reality in a sense. Not saying that intermittent fasting cannot be a lifestyle for some people, it definitely can, but we want to give that person as much flexibility and education within a plan to make them make the decision. And relating back to that, my last point on that is it sustainable for you? Again, we can go periods of time doing a certain fat loss phase, but the thing people struggle with is the transition back to finding someone that they can sustain. So that's something to have a think about. Now, here's my recommendations, taking all those things into account. If you're going to not go with the intermittent fasting approach, I still think it's wise to give yourself periods of time that you're not eating. Let's say, I would say 12-hour periods of not eating are probably a minimum in regards to just letting everything reset in the digestion of your body and giving you a good night's sleep, working with that circadian rhythm. And again, within that, giving yourself probably 3 or 4 hours by the time you eat your last meal to sleep for maximum results. So that's something we can all practice. As I said, see if your lifestyle is automatically suited to it, or if you have a smaller calorie deficit, can be useful. It's not a magic solution or anything, and there's trade-offs in regards to the cons that I said. When I say talk about fasting in the morning, like, you don't have to stick to 16 hours fasting, 8 hours eating. It could just be a case where you're like, well, I just like to skip breakfast and then eat lunch and dinner. Like, you don't have to join a cult or dieting strategy, which is ironically what a lot of training modalities and nutrition modalities, and I suppose we're in a time now where fucking vaccine status and then which side you're on, it turns into a team. The best nutrition things, like, you don't be in a team. Be in the team that doesn't have a team. Because you just book a hole yourself. What may work at one point in time may not work in the other. So we want different tools. So yeah, it could just be a case where you just skip breakfast and eat lunch and dinner. It doesn't have to be, I can only eat at this time. Like, just take that into account. One thing it is interesting that I have in my notes is just getting people used to, say, being hungry. But I swear there's certain people that if they don't have a meal, they think they're going to collapse and die of, like, starvation. So just giving someone back kind of those hunger signals and getting them used to what it feels like. And then maybe when they eat it, appreciate food again rather than just gorging all the time every day. Just abstain yourself and you can enjoy it then a little bit more. So yeah, for people outside of the ones with conditions, pre-diabetic, low blood pressure, maybe taking certain medications, women who are pregnant, children. It's okay to go periods of not eating. You're not going to die. You can survive more than you think. It's kind of like people, will probably relate to a certain thing where people in the Western world don't like feeling any negative feelings, and when they do, they automatically cannot handle it and then want to go and get out of the state. So check their phone or check their Instagram, check their Facebook. You feeling a bit stressed or bored or awkward in the lift. I live on level 25. I always laugh. I purposely try to stay in that awkward situation, a nervous situation. Don't check anything. Don't fiddle. Just keep yourself in that situation, because if we're constantly getting used to like never being in quote unquote negative situations where you're not feeling good, like that's not a good thing either. So get used to it, a bit of uncomfortable. Get used to that, and whether that's I know Dr. Anna Lembeke, who the book I have here on dopamine, she points that like if you're constantly driven by dopamine, and obviously eating releases dopamine, if you're doing everything in drive of dopamine, you're actually hitting those receptors too much. So you're making yourself feel good, but then the receptors end up downgrading. So then you need to release more dopamine and make yourself feel more good to keep yourself at baseline. So she recommends like you need a mix of both. You actually need periods of like where you're just being uncomfortable and bored and anxious, and people can probably think, I think Louise's dad said the last time he was bored was before the internet. This could relate back into a whole physiological and psychological neuroscience point of view, and we can tie it back into hunger. But yeah, you need periods of being hungry or being uncomfortable or being stressed or being awkward or being bored to then be able to have the good things. You need a nice little seesaw balance. If you never have the bad things and only have the good things, well, the problem with that is your receptors are going to downgrade, and then your ability to feel good in life overall is going to go down because the receptors have gone down. You've just hit that pathway too much. So yeah, you need a seesaw. If you want to appreciate your food, you need times of fasting. It's kind of like everything. I heard Dan Bilzerian talk about how he has sex 10 times a day. It was like, take a day off. Take a week off. Like, you're not going to appreciate it that much if you're just doing it all day. If you're eating chocolate all day, you're going to get over it to a certain point. Same with any like hedonic pathway. So yes, point is you're not going to starve if you skip a meal, no matter how hungry you get. For people that ask about training within that, I don't think, again, unless you're a point where you're trying not to sacrifice any muscle, well then, as I said, intermittent fasting may be enough for you. You might need 3 meals. And again, don't be afraid to just take what's good about this, and you're busy in the first half of the day, but also you're at a point where you don't want to sacrifice any muscle. Well, you could just have like a shake with your coffee. Like you don't have to fast. Like just use that approach of where you're just making it very easy for yourself. Have a protein shake that allows you to get a protein in for the 3 or 4 hour period, and then have your lunch and dinner. And at least with the shake, you only use 100 and 200 calories, so it's very minimal. I know when I've used it with certain people in the past, Louise has used it as well. Louise told me that she found it actually made her binge out more, and her and a regular eating pattern itself. But when she did use it, she used it with one of my colleagues, Nigel, when he coached her to sort out some digestion issues as well. And she basically used at times where she was fasting, and she just had some bone broth and got some kind of good healthy stuff in there to support her gut. But obviously, don't just take it off some random. Go and talk to a practitioner about it, maybe a nutritionist or a functional doctor, and they may point you in the right direction. I said I was going to mention some of the health benefits of fasting. From my point of view, and from what I think, I think most of the benefits are got from actually being in a calorie deficit. Apart from the meal timing with the circadian rhythms, that could definitely disrupt that. So the fasting approach or the time restricted eating approach definitely is very significant in terms of your circadian rhythm, which affects all other things. But in terms of people talk about like autophagy, where it kills off bad cells, longevity, anti-aging effect, I think a lot of that stuff is got from just being in a calorie deficit. Again, where you are not giving you're underfeeding your body, which kind of lets your body clear everything out in a sense and work properly. And then from a longevity point of view, I think a lot of studies they've done, calorie deficit basically slows down your body in a sense, not your metabolism, but like cell proliferation, I can never say that word. When you overeat, basically you're aging yourself in a sense. You're releasing all these free radicals and you're speeding up. Everything's working too much. So when your body works harder, it releases more free radicals, which aids your body a little bit more. But in the most reduction, simplified view possible, I'm saying that. But when you're in a calorie deficit, you're not feeding as much, and so everything's just working a bit slower. So yes, from my point of view, what I've seen, a lot of those benefits that people talk about in terms like lower blood pressure, better lipids, I think a lot of that stuff comes with just losing weight and being in a calorie deficit anyway. So always come back to that's the reason why. Doesn't burn more fat. That strategy, like any diets, like keto, doesn't burn more fat from being ketogenic. It's just a way of creating a calorie deficit. The most important thing always is about doing something that you can stick to. That's it. So for some people, some of the boxes that may have ticked, cool, you can try it out and let me know how you go. And it's just trial and error. It doesn't mean you have to stick to it for life. Just see if it works for you. And remember, it's more about what you eat and the amount of that you eat than when you eat. Alright? So this isn't to say that if you do intermittent fasting, you should blow your calories out in an 8-hour period. I could blow my calories out in a 5-minute period if you gave me a few pizzas. But yes, always take that into account. Hopefully by now we understand the equations and what's useful, what isn't, and the pros and cons. No, I rambled a bit, but hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's structured nicely for you to understand. Let me know how you found the podcast. Let me know if you're going to try it out. Let me know what nutrition thing you're doing. Let me know what you're struggling with. Send me a DM on Instagram. I'll reply to everyone that messaged me. I always want to see my followers get great results. If you need to download the free fat loss ebook that I give away on my Instagram in my bio, and look out over the next few weeks where I'm going to be launching my first ever group coaching program for the new year. For what year is it? 2022. Jesus. So download my ebook, get on my email list, keep up to date with that. I'll be releasing all the details soon. But yes, otherwise, I hope you have a great week. Hope that was useful. Please rate and review and share if it was. And I will talk to you all in the next episode.